What if I told you that three seemingly unrelated stories from this weekend actually reveal the exact moment when America's economic house of cards started tumbling down? Because that's exactly what happened and almost nobody is connecting these dots. Right now, as you're watching this, we're witnessing what might be the most predictable economic disaster in modern history unfolding in real time. And the scary part, the people who are supposed to see this coming are either blind to it or pretending it's not happening. Three major stories broke over the weekend that, when you piece them together, paint a terrifying picture of where we're headed. First, financial analysts are finally admitting what many of us have been saying for months. The AI bubble isn't just real. It's massive and it's about to pop. Second, seven major sectors of the American economy are already showing recession-level weakness that could drag everyone else down with them. And third, something so strange is happening in our job market that it's literally rattling Federal Reserve officials. Now, here's what's fascinating and frankly infuriating about how these stories are being covered. Each one is being treated like it's happening in a vacuum, as if the AI spending frenzy, the sectoral collapse, and the job market weirdness are completely unrelated phenomena. They're not. They're all symptoms of the same underlying disease, and that disease is about to go terminal. Let's start with this AI bubble story, because this is where the whole house of cards begins to fall. We're talking about tech companies that have collectively poured hundreds of billions of dollars into AI infrastructure over the past 2 years. Hundreds of billions. And here's the kicker. They're increasingly doing it with borrowed money and what NPR diplomatically calls risky tactics. Think about this for a second. These companies are taking on massive debt to buy AI chips and to build data centers for technology that, let's be brutally honest, hasn't proven it can generate anything close to the revenue needed to justify these investments. OpenAI, the poster child of the AI revolution, is burning through cash faster than almost any startup in history. And yet somehow we're supposed to believe this is sustainable. But here's what the mainstream coverage is missing. This isn't just about tech companies making bad bets. This is about fundamental misallocation of capital on a scale we have not seen since the dot-com boom. Except this time, it's not just venture capitalists and day traders getting caught up in the hype. It's pension funds, insurance companies, and banks that are all betting big on AI delivering returns that simply aren't materializing. And that brings us to story number two, the seven sectors of the economy that are already in deep trouble. We're talking about home building, trucking, retail, restaurants, and manufacturing, all showing signs of serious distress. Layoffs are mounting, demand is dropping, and profit margins are getting squeezed. Now, the Business Insider piece frames this as a warning sign of a coming recession, but I think that's missing the bigger picture. This isn't a warning sign. This is the recession already happening for huge chunks of the economy. The only reason we're not calling it that officially is because a few high-flying tech stocks and AI-related companies are still propping up the overall numbers. But here's the thing about sectoral recessions. They don't stay contained forever. When trucking companies start falling, that affects everyone who ships goods. When home builders stop building, that affects everyone from lumber suppliers to appliance manufacturers to real estate agents. These ripple effects are already starting to spread, but they're being masked by all the AI spending we just talked about. And this is where it gets really interesting, because that AI spending, it's not creating the kind of jobs that replace the ones being lost in these traditional sectors. A data center might cost $1 billion to build, but once it's operational, it employs a few dozen people. Meanwhile, a trucking company or a construction firm employs hundreds or thousands of workers per $1 billion of economic activity. Which brings us to the third story, this unusual trend that's worrying the Fed. And folks, when the Federal Reserve officials are publicly admitting they're rattled by something, you know it's serious. What they're seeing is something that should not be passable according to traditional economic models. Job growth does not match productivity. Wage growth does not match inflation. And employment patterns that don't make sense given what's happening in the broader economy. Here's my theory on what's really happening and why the Fed is so confused. We're living through what I'm calling the fake economy moment where massive capital misallocation in AI and tech is creating artificial economic activity that's masking the real deterioration happening everywhere else. Think about it this way. If you're spending borrowed money to build data centers and buy AI chips, that shows up as economic growth. The construction workers building those centers, the engineers designing them, the companies manufacturing the equipment, they're all benefiting from this spending. But none of this activity is generating sustainable economic value. It's just moving money around in increasingly elaborate circles while the real economy, the one that produces actual goods and services people need, slowly crumbles. And here's the really scary part. When this AI bubble finally pops, and it will pop, we're going to discover that the weakness in those 7 sectors was not a warning sign of recession. It was the recession that was already here, hidden behind a mountain of AI hype and borrowed money. The Federal Reserve is rattled because they're starting to realize that their traditional tools for managing the economy don't work when such a huge chunk of economic activity is essentially fake. How do you set interest rates when you can't tell the difference between real growth and speculative bubble growth? How do you manage inflation when prices are being distorted by massive capital misallocation? This is why I think we're looking at something potentially worse than a traditional recession. We're looking at a moment when the artificial supports holding up large parts of our economy get pulled away all at once. The AI companies that can generate real revenue will start failing. The debt fuel expansion will reverse. And all those sectors that are already in trouble, they won't have the AI boom to mask their problems anymore. But here's what really gets me about this whole situation. It was completely avoidable. The warning signs have been there for months. The unsustainable spending, the job market distortions, the sectoral weakness, none of this happened overnight. But instead of addressing these issues head on, we collectively chosen to believe that this time is different. That AI will somehow magically solve all of our economic problems. Well, here's a reality check. Technology does not create economic value by just existing. It creates value by making real processes more efficient or enabling new forms of productivity. And so far, for all the hundreds of billions we've spent on AI infrastructure, we're not seeing those productivity gains where it matters. So, here's my question for you, and I really want to know what you think. Are we watching the early stages of an economic reckoning that's going to make 2008 look like a warm-up act? Or am I completely wrong about how these three stories connect? Because if I'm right, the next 6 months are going to be absolutely wild. And most people are completely unprepared for what's coming. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an update. Your support lets me keep bringing you more content just like this. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.